Anytime we hit add to cart, we want to be sure that we're going to get value for our money. This is especially true for something like a Coverplate die, which can be expensive. So how do we choose the right one, and then how do we make sure we use it? Let's see. This is the brick Coverplate from a Jillian Vance design. It sells for about $24, and here's what I love about it. First, the pattern is a classic brick pattern. It can be used pretty much any time of year for any occasion. It's geometric, repetitive, and it'll work well for masculine cards too. Second, it covers a full A2 size panel. You can always cut it down, but you have the option to use it to cover the whole card. And third, you can use the outline portion on its own as a die cut or even as a stencil. And you can use the little rectangles on their own, build a pattern, or use them as one-word sentiment strips. Today, I'm going to use it to build 3 Christmas cards with 3 different techniques. Let's start easy by turning this die into a stamp. Yes, that's what I said. All I need is a stamping foam. This is an inexpensive addition to a craft room that really lets you get so much more from many of your craft tools, and I'm working on a full video on this tool for later this month. To make the stamp, I need to heat up the surface of the stamping foam with my heat tool. It's taken me a little bit of practice to kind of get the feel of how long is the right amount of time, but I'm getting better at it, even though I'm still pretty much a newbie. I find that about 20 seconds works well, and you want to keep the heat tool moving because you want that whole surface to be as evenly heated as possible. And that's so when you quickly press it down onto the Coverplate die with even pressure, you'll get a nice even impression of the pattern. I put an acrylic block down on top of the stamping foam to help make sure that the pressure is spread evenly. You want to have that nearby and work quickly to be sure that the foam's still warm so it can really pick up the pattern. And here's my stamp. Now all I have to do is ink it up. I've chosen 3 shades of brown from my collection of Catherine Pooler inks to give me a look with lots of variation in color. I'm using over coffee, s'mores, and then spice to warm it up a bit. Before stamping, I gave the foam a couple of light spritzes of water, and then I pressed it down into the center of a panel of white cardstock, leaving it to sit and allow the ink to transfer before lifting it off. And I think that's pretty cool. I can see the variation in color, and the bricks almost look dimensional. To clean it off, I've seen Simon spritz it with water, and that works, but I wanted to also try a baby wipe to see how it went, and it worked fine and took all the ink off. Then you just heat it up again, and the pattern will disappear from the surface, and it's ready to use again next time. As I say, I'll be doing a more in-depth video on this amazing little tool a little later in the month, so I hope you'll drop by for that. To decorate my wall, I'm going to hang some mistletoe. I've cut 3 branches plus some berries and a bow from the Merry Mistletoe set from white cardstock. Of course, you can use colored cardstock, but in most cases I prefer to color my own, which means I don't have to try and store lots of colors or their scraps. With larger die cuts, I tend to ink blend them, but with these, I'm going to use my Copic markers for a change. I've got 2 shades of red and 2 shades of green so that I can add a bit of dimension. I just color them while they're still in place in the panel of cardstock. I start with the lighter color and I scribble over the whole thing, and then I go back with the darker one to add a bit of shading. The bow has little cut marks to show where the shading should stop and start, and for the berries I just add little C shapes of the darker red to make them look round. With the green, I found that my contrast was pretty intense, so after adding the darker shade, I went back over all the leaves and branches with the lighter green again to blend it out and soften the look just a little. My sentiment is a nice chunky font, and I stamped it with Cranberry Fizz ink onto a stitched sentiment strip, and then I assembled the card on a craft card base. I used a white gel pen to add a few highlights to the berries and the ribbon. I think that this card is a perfect example of the versatility of this brick background. You could easily change out the mistletoe and the sentiment, and this card could work for anyone at any time. But right now, it's warm, rustic, and Christmassy. Another way to use a Coverplate die is to emboss with it. First, I'm creating some red cardstock by pressing my ink pad onto a panel of white cardstock. This is the Cozy Cottage die, and it's a cute little house made of boards. These little embossed details are really pretty, but today I want to make a little red brick house for a Christmas card. Now I can't use the die to cut my red house. It's got all those little details, so I'm tracing around the outside of the die on my red cardstock. I use my scissors to fussy cut it, cutting on the insides of the line so it's not showing. Then I want to line this up so that the bricks are straight before I emboss it. To emboss, each machine has a different sandwich, but the important thing is the rubber embossing mat. This will prevent the die from cutting right through the cardstock. I've got a Gemini Junior machine, and my sandwich is 2 Sizzix cutting plates, the tan rubber mat, the red house, the brick cover plate, and then 2 double-sided mats. It's a real mishmash of plates, and as I say, your machine will have instructions so you can emboss with the die. Next, I laid my red brick house over my white log cabin, and I trimmed the red house down to match it as much as possible. As I'm watching this, I'm thinking that maybe you don't really have to do this, but it may give you straighter sides, and in the next step, I'm going to be adding a roof and decorations that were designed to fit the die cut, so I'll leave that one up to you. It only takes a couple of minutes. These decorations for this cottage are from the Sweet Gingerbread add-on set, and they turn the birdhouse into a gingerbread house perfect for winter. I've added the front porch, the snowy roof, a door, a Christmas tree, and a wreath. To assemble a card, I used another die from the Sweet Gingerbread set to make some snow, and I cut and colored another tree. This time I cut the tree in half vertically so it'll look like I have 3 trees in total. That's one clever trick, and here's another one. Because of the shape of this tree, you can cut off the bottom to make it look like you have taller and shorter trees. I'm not actually going to cut this one off on the left because I can just tuck it under the snow, but isn't that brilliant? This is why this is one of my favorite tree dies. There's lots of options for building a forest if you want. Just before I glued it all down, I stamped another chunky sentiment. This one says Merry and Bright, and this time I used black ink and my mini Misty. I love the look of this embossing on this house, and it's a great example of not having to use the whole panel of bricks by just trimming it down to work with your design. I added some gems as ornaments on my trees and also as a doorknob. Okay, now I think you're really going to like this one. I'm going to do some inlay die cutting. So first I'm going to blend some inks again for my bricks. I'm deliberately putting them down in streaks because I want lots of variation in my colors, and I'm not putting down a lot of pressure because I do want that streaky look. Then I cut the panel with the cover plate, and then I cut it again from white cardstock. And then I pushed out all the little pieces, keeping the 2 piles separate. I won't be using the white bricks or the brown grout, so I can keep those for future cards. Then I thought maybe the white grout would be too much of a contrast, so I inked up the outline with buttercream ink, which is a beigey yellow, and then I grabbed a piece of printer paper and I put adhesive down all over it. I find this method to be the easiest way to inlay. I didn't have to put dots of adhesive on the back of the grout outline, and I won't have to add glue to the back of each brick. There's already a sticky place for them. Before I start inlaying though, I'll show you my idea. This brick wall is going to be a fireplace with Santa sticking his head out. I'm going to use this tag die to cut out the fireplace, so I don't need to inlay the bricks back into that area since it'll be cut out. I inlaid the bricks back into the outline and I mixed them up to get a more random look. And honestly, the colors have transported me back to my 70s rec room. All I need now is some orangey rust shag carpet. Maybe I should have done grays instead and updated the look a little. If you don't have a tag die like this one, you could use a circle die and then cut straight down the sides carefully. And here's Santa poking his head in to make sure the coast is clear before he comes in to fill the stockings. Speaking of which, I used a sentiment strip in that same 'Tis the Season sentiment to create my mantle, and I added a garland of holly from the Sam E. Snowman die set. To fill in some of that black space, I used the mini headline alphabet die set to cut red and green ho ho ho. I added some white gel pen highlights along with some stickles on Santa's hat and pom-pom. If you like to get value from your cover plate dies, I've got another video right here that's packed with ideas, using one with a completely different look. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.